Welcome everyone to this new tutorial. It has been quite a while, I know, but we're back, so let's just keep going. And I want to thank Nathan Riley a lot for the inspiration. He creates very cool stuff, and yeah, this one was a big inspiration from him. So I'll also leave a link down in the description below so you can follow him on Instagram and all that other shebang. So let's jump into the tutorial. As you guys know, it has been quite a while, but here's the new tutorial. Yeah, I will show you actually the finished scene. It's quite simple. It might look a little bit difficult if you're a beginner, like the animation and all of the materials, but it's actually really simple, okay? So even if you're a beginner, just join and yeah, we're gonna fix this, okay? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we have the right size for this cube. So scale Z10. Now, I do think in general it's a bit too big, so I'm gonna do scale 0.5 just so it's a bit smaller overall. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to add some extra modifiers. So add modifier, bevel, and as you can see, the modifier bevel works, but it's a bit different, right? So the bevel around here seems smaller than here on top. That is because we just scaled this whole cube around the Z-axis, right? So if you click on Ctrl A and apply the scale, you can see that now we have an even bevel all the way around. Now, let's put the segments a little bit higher, so maybe at 4 or 5. Make sure we do shade smooth, and we have a decent looking model. We could try to add some extra subdivisions, but you need to make sure that the subdivisions are high enough so it actually looks good. This is up to you. I think without or with might work great. But you can see that if you use the subdivisions, that it looks just a little bit more clean with the shading. Now, we can see that the subdivision 3 works great, it looks good. So I'm going to put render at 3, and then my levels in the viewport at 1, just so I don't clog down my computer. As last modifier, we need an array modifier. If we go and click on 1, you can see that around the x-axis, we're going to array, and we're going to do a count of 15. I want this to be in the middle though. If we look good, every one of these cubes is 1 unit in Blender. So if you just do GX1, it moves 1 around. But it's already, you know, at half here. So GX.5. Now we're going to move it back. So there are 15. So we need to do G for moving, X because it's the X-axis, minus because I'm not going to move in the plus but in the minus direction, and then 7.5, right? Awesome. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on this side, and then half was here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on this side. That means that we're nice in the middle. Now, the next part is the animation. The animation is actually quite simple, okay? We first want to look at our timeline. Our timeline right now starts at frame 1 and ends at 250. Let's put this end to 120. If you have a slower computer or don't want to render for a long time, you could even put this a little bit lower, okay? Just keep that in mind. Now, we're going to rotate this. Let's go to frame 0. I go to frame 0 because I want this animation to be loopable. So let's keep it at 0 for right now. And we're going to rotate the x-axis, right? So right click, insert keyframe at 0. At 120 frames, I want this rotation to be 360, which is a whole round. Right click, insert keyframe. So now, if we play this, you can see that it rotates a whole round and then ends up here. Before we are going to apply the array modifier, I first want to go here, move this up, this as well, and then use the graph editor. In this graph editor, I want to delete the Y Euler and the Z Euler. This is just to make the next part a little bit easier, okay? Because I'm gonna select this keyframe, and sometimes when the Z and the Y are in front of it, you just keep clicking and this doesn't select the X-axis, for instance. So this just makes it a bit easier. So don't worry too much about it. That's just a little thing I did. Now, what we want to do is want to apply our array modifier, and we actually want to separate all of these. So going to top, select everything with A, and then click on P to separate by loose parts. Now you can see that all of these cubes are separated by loose parts. I want to add another collection in here, so right click and then new collection. Drag these cubes into this collection and just rename this collection to cube. You can collapse this and then just hide it whenever we want. This will come in handy later on. Now, if we play this, you can see that there's nothing special about this animation. All of these cubes here go at the same speed. That is not what we want. So we're going to select our first cube here, and let's look at this curve. So you can zoom out here with scrolling, and if you hold Ctrl and click the middle mouse button, so the scroll wheel, you can move this a little bit like that, so it kind of scales it down. And what we want to do here is we want to look at this curve. So if we look at this curve, you can see that in the beginning of our animation, we start quite slowly, as you can see here. Then it speeds up, and here it keeps a constant speed, right? And at the end, it slows down again, which is this curve. So that is what Bezier curves do, and we actually want that. It looks quite smooth and nice. But we want them at different speeds. So if we select our first cube here, make sure you actually go somewhere in the animation, so maybe at frame 30. Then make sure you drag this out or click on it. Go to F curves and scroll down. We can see our active keyframe, which is this keyframe, has an interpolation of a Bezier, which is what we can see right here. So this is the left handle of this keyframe, which is this thing here, this one. And this is the right one, this one here. With these, we can play a little bit around, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my second cube, make sure I select the left keyframe, and then go to the right handle and move this frame up by 5. Okay, so 45. We're actually going to do an increment of 5 every single time. So you can see that at 45, it moved a bit backwards because this curve is actually moved backwards, right? So they do still start at the same position, but because the curve is a little bit dragged out, you can see that this one goes a bit quicker in the beginning than this one. But in the end, they all match up at the same place again because this keyframe will always stay in the same spot. So we're going to do this for every single one of them. So just put it at like 20 or 30, your keyframes, and then just select the next one, right? So this one has a frame of 45, the right handle. Then this one is going to have one of 50. This one, 55. $105 and 110. So now if we look at our animation, when we play it, you can see that we get a very cool effect here. And that is the whole animation. It is that simple. So I would highly recommend you saving it for right now, and then we can go on to the next part. So now that we have the animation, you might ask, what is next? Well, it's going to be very simple. We're going to put our camera in place. So click on 0, go to View, and do Camera to View. We can move it a little bit and think like, yeah, maybe I want it here. So I just want it straight on here. Go to Item, select your camera, and just make sure that it fits nicely. So the x-axis can be 0, rotation 90, 0, 0, and maybe move it a little bit around the z-axis like this. Perfect. Then make sure you put camera to view off again, because otherwise if you move it by accident, it just moves the camera as well. Now, I'm gonna drag another 3D view out of here. So this is our 3D view, and the right one I'm gonna keep at the camera, so 0, and just drag this out. And the left one I can actually put some stuff inside right here. So if I just put a cube right now, blah blah blah, or a plane, whatever, you can see that I can just move it wherever I want in this kind of free 3D space. And here we have our camera view. So I really like to work like that and work on the composition. So, okay, the first thing that we need is a plane. This plane is going to be our lake. So you can rename it to lake or water. And you kind of want to put it in place. So I'm going to move it a little bit down because I still want to see the reflection on here. And make sure you make it big enough, okay? It can be quite big. Now, we want to create some cool mountains maybe, and the surrounding of the lake. And there are multiple ways to do this, but one very and simple way is here in Landscape. If you don't have this option, just go to Edit, Preferences, and look for Landscape, which is going to be Add Mesh and then ANT Landscape. Take it on, and that should be it. So now it ends up here. in your side also here. I have it. On every 3D view, you have like that create option, and you can create the landscape. So if I create a landscape right now, you can see that it's a little bit hard to see, and that is why I also put this whole cube into a collection, because now if you just take this off, we can just keep going here. Make sure you put this on again, and I'll make my screen just a little bit bigger so you guys can see what is up. But I don't want to change too much about this actual model, okay? I want to have some extra subdivisions, but you can of course play with it, like how much you want to play with it. So I'm gonna do the X and the Y subdivisions at 640 by 640. Be careful, if this is too high for your computer, you're gonna regret it. So you can also do like whatever, like 320 or whatever. Now, I like this. I'm gonna scale it up, and I'm gonna move it backwards. So let me drag this back just so we can see what we're doing here with the composition. And we can see that we are creating these cool mountains, right? So this is essentially how I created the mountains in the back. But the lake is also very important. So let's also create the lake. Click on Landscape New. Make sure we zoom a little bit in here. And I'm gonna hide the cubes again. And instead of it being the default preset, I am going to select this operator presets and click on lake. Now, for some reason, these cubes keep popping up, which is annoying. But this is our lake. Awesome, right? Now, what I want to do here, again, subdivisions a little bit higher. And I am not sure why it just keeps, giving me these cubes. Get away. But because I put the subdivision a bit higher, it looks more crisp. And I can scale this up. And make sure I put it in place. Here. Somewhere around here seems to work. And you can scale it up how much you want. So now, again, just look at your composition here and see what you want. So I just do want a little bit more water. So I can just go to 7 in the top view and just move this around. Like something like this, maybe. I'm going to scale it up a little bit more. And now that we have this, we can just duplicate this landscape here, so this mountain. And we can just play around with it. You can see that a piece of here gets cut off and it doesn't really show the whole mountain. That is because the camera itself, if we go into this little camera tab, you can see that we have a clip start and end. Just move the end way up. And we can actually see everything here. Now we have 2 of these mountains. And what we're going to do later on is we're going to make sure that the camera has some depth of field. And this kind of makes that the further something is away, the more blurry it will look in the camera, okay? So in the back, we're going to make even bigger mountains. But then move them to the bottom. And this is going to be way more blurry, but it will actually kind of separate the sky from the reflections of the water. So that's actually quite cool. And yeah, it just looks cool in general. So make sure you hide the cube sometimes to see the background. And I do think this should be a bit bigger. I don't really want to see this kind of separation in here. Something like that looks a bit more natural. Still looks cool with my cubes. And yeah, it's just, you need to play a little bit around with this and just see whatever works for you. But in general, this looks decent and yeah, it's quite cool to work with, right? So now, if we have everything, we can start to actually create some cool materials for this. So let's save it for right now and we can work on the materials. Creating materials is quite simple. And yeah, it also doesn't have to be hard, of course. But I want to show you that without any good lighting, we can't really have any good materials, right? So go here into shading. We're gonna shade our 3D model. I'm gonna hide or delete this light for right now. Click on 0, so we have our camera view here. And I want to select this model here. Now, what we want to do is we want to give this some cool materials. So if we go here into our viewport shading, we can see what our scene looks like. And yes, I agree. It looks kind of dark, right? Even if we go here into cycles, it just looks dark. So what do we need to do? Well, first of all, I'm going to make sure if I work in cycles, I'm going to put this to GPU. And when using the GPU, I'm going to put the tiles at 256 by 256. That seems to work great. And so now that you have optimized everything for the GPU, you can go here into world. and add an environment texture. Color goes into color, and let's open a HDRI. For this HDRI, I'm using the sky is on fire. I will leave a link down below for the HDRI and the textures, okay? I don't really want to show a building in the back, okay? So I'm gonna use a texture coordinate node. So just coordinate. And a mapping node. Generated goes into vector, and vector goes into the vector of the environment texture. And now we can essentially just rotate it around the z-axis. So this already looks way better. And what we want to do is now we can really start to create our models, okay? So go back here into object, and we have one of these cubes selected. I want to make sure that the transmission goes all the way up, and maybe the roughness at 0.1. So it is kind of a glass texture, looks really cool in my opinion. And I didn't really do anything more than this. Maybe I made it a little bit darker, but I don't even remember. Maybe a bit darker, yeah. So make sure you rename this to glass. And then we can go here and select our lake, right? So the lake needs some lake or water texture. I'm just gonna make it all the way black. And make sure that the roughness is all the way at 0, so it reflects perfectly whatever we have on top here. Now, for the mountains and like this lake landscape, we need to add some extra textures, right? Because otherwise it just doesn't look good. So let's just create a new texture here. It's gonna be a ground or rock whatever texture. So image texture. And then let's go to rock, and this is going to be our diffuse. So make sure that you have your diffuse on. And here we can see what actually, what it looks like. We can also go here into the material viewport shading. And we can see that it looks quite bland. We need to use a texture coordinate node and a mapping node. Let's combine these. Let's do UV for right now, see what that does. Okay, that doesn't do anything, so let's do generated. And generated looks way better, right? So right now, you want to look at the size. This is what you want, or do you want to scale this a bit up? So if I do 5 by 5, I get a way different result, right? So this actually looks quite decent. Might even make it smaller like this. Yes, it's going to be a bit blurry anyways, and I'm going to make it darker. So if it repeats a few times, it is not the worst that can happen. But I do want to make it a little bit darker. So I'm just going to add a hue and saturation node. Let's put this value to 0.1 maybe. Maybe a bit higher. And then you can also add a brightness and contrast node. That is all up to you what you want to do here. Brightness and contrast. But yeah, you can play around with these nodes and just change the color a little bit to make it more, I guess, dark, whatever. Now, what you want to do is you want to just duplicate this, so Ctrl-C and again Ctrl-V. And then instead of the diffuse, we want to add the specular. Specular is a non-color. And then we go here into the spec. Make sure you also combine this mapping node in here. Let's do this one more time. Into the roughness. So roughness. Also roughness is a non-color. And we could do this even one more time for some of the normal maps, right? So here, normal. Make sure you put a normal map node in between. So normal map, bam. And then also for this one, you can combine this together. And also this one is a non-color data. So this is kind of the materials that we're working with right now. And yeah, I like it. So we can give the same materials to these mountains in the back, just to ground for everything. And we should be fine. So let's look at the rendered shading. And here we can see that already looks way cooler, right? So you can even make it darker. I think I did. So if we go to the brightness and contrast, you can just put the brightness maybe -1. I don't know. Just play a little bit around with that stuff. But yeah, the focus should be on here, and you can still move these mountains around. Like maybe I don't want it here, so maybe I'm gonna move this a bit down so I can see more of the sky. I do have these cool reflections from these mountains in here, which is also very cool. If you want to render like kind of glass inside cycles, I do highly suggest you maybe use some denoising, and also the render sampling should be way up. Okay, so maybe times 4, maybe even to 1024, something like that. Then it starts to look good. Yeah, you know, if you do kind of translucent stuff, it creates more of the fireflies that we don't want, but it's just such a cool material to work with. Now, if you want to render this as an animation, go here into Output Properties. Make sure you put an output folder in here. So let's say I'm going here, create a new folder. It's going to be my render animation. Select that, accept, and now every single image that we're going to save here, which I would highly suggest you do a TIFF file, that will be going into this folder, okay? It's that easy. Make sure you save it before rendering. Bam, and then we're good. So that is everything that you need to know. You can start to click on render, and I hope to see some of those renders on Instagram or whatever. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.